grass afforded shelter to numerous aquatic birds, pelicans, etc. After following a course north easterly, it conflows with the Kingani, which, at a distance of 4 miles from Gonera's country house, bends eastward into the sea. To the west, after a mile of cultivation, fall and recede in succession the sea beach of old in lengthy parallel waves, overgrown densely with forest grass and marsh reeds. On the spines of these land swells flourish ebony, calabash, and mango. "Sofari, sofari, Leo! Pakia, pakia!" A journey to-day! Set out, set out! rang the cheery voice of the kirangozi, echoed by that of my servant Selim, on the morning of the 4th day, which was fixed for our departure in earnest. As I hurried my men to their work, and lent a hand with energy to drop the tents, I mentally resolved that, if my caravan should give me clear space, Unyanyembe should be our resting place before 3 months expired. By 6 a.m. our early breakfast was dispatched, and the donkeys and pagazis were defiling from Camp Gonera. Even at this early hour, and in this country place, there was quite a collection of curious natives, to whom we gave the parting "Kwaheri" with sincerity. My bay horse was found to be invaluable for the service of a quartermaster of a transport train; for to such was I compelled to compare myself. I could stay behind until the last donkey had quitted the camp, and by a few minutes' gallop I could put myself at the head, leaving Shaw to bring up the rear. The road was a mere footpath, and led over a soil which, though sandy, was of surprising fertility, producing grain and vegetables 100-fold, the sowing and planting of which was done in the most unskilful manner. In their fields, at heedless labour, were men and women in the scantiest costumes, compared to which Adam and Eve, in their fig tree apparel, must have been en grande tenue. We passed them with serious faces, while they laughed and giggled, and pointed their index fingers at this and that, which to them seemed so strange and bizarre. In about half an hour we had left the tall matama and fields of watermelons, cucumbers, and manioc, and, crossing a reedy slough, were in an open forest of ebony and calabash. In its depths are deer in plentiful numbers, and at night it is visited by the hippopotami of the Kingani, for the sake of its grass. In another hour we had emerged from the woods, and were looking down upon the broad valley of the Kingani, and a scene presented itself, so utterly different from what my foolish imagination had drawn, that I felt quite relieved by the pleasing disappointment. Here was a valley stretching 4 miles east and west, and about 8 miles north and south, left with the richest soil to its own wild growth of grass, which in civilization would have been a most valuable meadow for the rearing of cattle, invested as it was by dense forests, darkening the horizon at all points of the compass, and folded in by tree-clad ridges. At the sound of our caravan the red antelope bounded away to our right and the left, and frogs hushed their croak. The sun shone hot, and while traversing the valley we experienced a little of its real African fervour. About half-way across we came to a sluice of stagnant water which, directly in the road of the caravan, had settled down into an oozy pond. The pagazis crossed a hastily constructed bridge, thrown up a long time ago by some Washensi Samaritans. It was an extraordinary affair, rugged tree limbs resting on very unsteady forked piles, and it had evidently tested the patience of many a loaded Mnyamwezi, as it did those porters of our caravan. Our weaker animals were unloaded, the puddle between Bagamoyo and Genera having taught us prudence, but this did not occasion much delay. The men worked smartly under Shaw's supervision. The turbid Kingani, famous for its hippopotami, was reached in a short time, and we began to thread the jungle along its right bank until we were halted point blank by a narrow sluice having an immeasurable depth of black mud. The difficulty presented by this was very grave, though its breadth was barely 8 feet. The donkeys, and least of all the horses, could not be made to traverse 2 poles like our biped carriers, neither could they be driven into the sluice, where they would quickly founder. The only available way of crossing it in safety was by means of a bridge, to endure in this conservative land for generations as the handiwork of the Wasungu. So we set to work, there being no help for it, with American axes, the first of their kind, the strokes of which ever rang in this part of the world, to build a bridge. Be sure it was made quickly, for where the civilized white is found, a difficulty must vanish. The bridge was composed of 6 stout trees thrown across. Over these were laid, crosswise, 15 pack saddles, covered again with a thick layer of grass. All the animals crossed it safely, and then for a third time that morning the process of wading was performed. The Kingani flowed northerly here, and our course lay down its right bank. Half a mile in that direction through a jungle of giant reeds and extravagant climbers brought us to the ferry, where the animals had to be again unloaded. Verily, I wished when I saw its deep muddy waters that I possessed the power of Moses with his magic rod, or, what would have answered my purpose as well, Aladdin's ring, for then I could have found myself and party on the opposite side without further trouble. But, not having either of these gifts, I issued orders for an immediate crossing, for it was ill wishing sublime things before this most mundane prospect. Kingwere, the canoe paddler, espying us from his brake covert on the opposite side, civilly responded to our halloos, and brought his huge hollow wood tree skilfully over the whirling eddies of the river to where we stood waiting for him. While one party loaded the canoe with our goods, others got ready a long rope to fasten around the animals' necks, wherewith to haul them through the river to the other bank. After seeing the work properly commenced, I sat down on a condemned canoe to amuse myself with the hippopotami by peppering their thick skulls with my No. 12 smoothbore. The Winchester rifle, calibre 44, a present from the Hon. Edward J. Morris, our minister at Constantinople, did no more than slightly tap them, causing about as much injury as a boy's sling. It was perfect in its accuracy of fire, for 10 times in succession I struck the tops of their heads between the ears. One old fellow, with the look of a sage, was tapped close to the right ear by one of these bullets. Instead of submerging himself as others had done, he coolly turned round his head as if to ask, "Why this waste of valuable cartridges on us?" The response to the mute inquiry of his sageship was an 1.25 ounce bullet from the smooth bore, which made him bellow with pain, and in a few moments he rose up again, tumbling in his death agonies. As his groans were so piteous, I refrained from a useless sacrifice of life, and left the amphibious horde in peace. A little knowledge concerning these uncouth inmates of the African waters was gained even during the few minutes we were delayed at the ferry. When undisturbed by foreign sounds, they congregate in shallow water on the sandbars, with the fore half of their bodies exposed to the warm sunshine. When thus somnolently reposing, very like a herd of enormous swine. When startled by the noise of an intruder, they plunge hastily into the depths, lashing the waters into a yellowish foam, and scatter themselves below the surface, when presently the heads of a few reappear, snorting the water from their nostrils, to take a fresh breath and a cautious scrutiny around them. When thus, we see but their ears, forehead, eyes, and nostrils, and as they hastily submerge again, it requires a steady wrist and a quick hand to shoot them. I have heard several comparisons made of their appearance while floating in this manner. Some Arabs told me before I had seen them that they looked like dead trees carried down the river. Others, who in some country had seen hogs, thought that they resembled them. but to my mind they looked more like horses.